Emid, 1946 to 2022. A writer, a friend, a mentor, a brother. We get so few experiences with people who are genuine, who love their craft, love people, and with their words and their language, they elevate. And that was my good friend, Emid. Al was a very special person. In Toronto, in Canada, he was one of the great wordsmiths in the financial industry. More than that, Al was a giver. You meet givers and takers, and Al was a giver. Whatever he had, he gave. And he gave it willingly. Now, towards the end of Al's life, we've had this crazy time that's actually descended upon us. But I want to share with you a really quick memory of Al for myself. I met Al back in the early 2000s. I hadn't yet become a writer, and I did. And Al and I connected. When I was negotiating my first book, Al gave me direction. When Al launched his first radio program, Al invited me on to be a regular, to actually explore things that I wanted to explore. Now, what you're going to see in the next hour is a tribute to Al, of a group that Al put together for other writers, people who you would see normally as competition. Al didn't see that. He saw writers and people as people, and the greatest thing about Al is he elevated. In the next hour, you're going to hear people share wonderful stories about how Al helped, how he was the most collegial person you will ever have met. I will miss Al Emid. However, I carry Al's story. And the greatest lesson that he taught me was the value of a life is not what you have and what you've taken, it's what you've given. And Al, he was one of those people. Don't take my word for it. Over the next hour, listen to testimonials of people that Al had helped.
First, I wanted to read something that is what Al saw himself as, which I thought was great, and I really wish I'd read it a lot earlier. So he said, I am a journalist and author with global reach and credibility. I specialize in the molding, shaping, and communication of worthwhile ideas. And the worthwhile part is all important. If they're not worthwhile, why bother? To know how I think, play Bob Seger's Against the Wind, and then play Frank Sinatra's My Way. If you have a bit more time, play Anthony Quayle's rendition of Longfellow's Psalm of Life. Specialties: clarity, conciseness, crystal clear communication, absolute attention to accuracy and deadlines. In books, I have authored and co-authored 6 books. In radio, I have worked in both the United States and Canada and currently produce an anchor and news radio program. In journalism, my byline appears in the United States, Canada, and the Middle East. So I thought that was a nice way to sum up and to know more about Al than I had in the past. I did actually try to find Anthony Quayle's rendition of Longfellow's Psalm of Life, but have yet to achieve or find that one yet. So I wanted to, I think we will start with the people that have said, and assuming that they are ready, the people that they have, that either have internet problems or have hardline commitments to go ahead. So Norma, I was thinking that you might go first.
Trying to unmute myself, sorry. Thank you so much. Jocelyn and I went to the celebration of life, and we were trying to recall when we first became involved with Al's group, because that's how we all referred it to as Al's group. And so we think it goes back to 2009. So that to me is, it's quite a long time. And what always struck me about Al was his, I guess it has to be his dedication to his craft, to his desire to always do the best, and to not just accept concepts, but to delve deeper into understanding them, and to be as thorough as he could in whatever, you know, he wrote or talked about. But going to the group, I felt that he was very encouraging, and very encouraged everyone to, whatever the topic was, encouraged, well, certainly encouraged me to kind of, you know, put together my presentations. And one thing I always remember about Al, the moment you got the topic, you could count on at least 30 emails from him with all sorts of places you could go for more information. So I always found that kind of amusing, and but also very helpful. So I always found him a very delightful soul, a very kind soul, and certainly a very gentle soul. So I think he'll be very missed. And I was really delighted that he was able to embrace Zoom as a forum to be able to continue the meetings, because I think that was important for him. I think for the group as well. And I have always enjoyed the members of the group that have come. I've made friends along the way. I personally was introduced to the group through Katita Stark, and she's not part of today's session, I don't believe. But so yeah, I mean, I'm thankful for everything that Al did, and for and just to be able to know him. I think it was a real honor to be able to know him.
Thank you very much, Norma. That was great. For those that have just joined us, we are going to have different people talking, just their memories of Al. We have a couple people that may have more challenges or have time or have commitments. So we're going to start with a couple of people. And also there's some people that can only be listening at the moment, but I will read their comments again because internet's a little tricky. So I'd like to go now to Rosemary McCracken.
Hi there. I've known Al in passing, I guess, for at least 20 years. When years ago, when we were, I was working on the news desk as a copy editor at the Financial Post, and a bit later in the special reports department. Al was a freelancer and generally wrote about insurance. And so I'd have to edit his copy and often have to give him a phone call if there was something I needed a little bit of explanation on. So we had a kind of a telephone relationship. And I only met him in passing when I went to Investment Executive, and he was went there as an editor, and around the same time as Susan Yellen was there, and we met him at least I met him in person for the first time at a party that was given. Investment Executive had its 10th anniversary, and he arrived in person. So I met him, and then he invited me to join the group about this group about 10 years ago. He always, so I knew him first as a journalist, and we were both, I was editing the copy and he was writing it. But then in the group, got to know him as a person and realized what a kind, gentle soul he He was. And he always had a way of putting a positive spin on things, always looking at the good side. And I remember once a couple of years ago, a few years ago, his brother died. And I think he told us. So I had a sympathy card on hand. And my husband used to go to the Good Life Fitness Center down at the Manulife Center. So I said, here, leave this for Al at the desk. And anyhow, somehow Al came down and met my husband, and I had emails and emails about thanking me, about and hand delivered, and it was just a card. And I felt like saying, Al, I was just trying to save a stamp by hand delivering it, but he was so thrilled that it was hand delivered. So he always put a positive spin on everything, and that was very much like Al. And even, as we get older, I mean, I know I don't put a positive spin on a lot of things. You look at the dark side, but Al was always, always very positive about things, and I'll remember him well. He was a great character.
He really was, and thank you very much for that. I'm going to read something next, and then I know that Peter Merrick, I just actually reached out to this morning because I saw such a nice thing that he had written about Al quite a number of years ago. And since I realized this wasn't part of his day for sure, I'm going to allow him to speak after I just read some few words from a person who also worked at Investment Executive. And I just liked the way she also spoke about editing Al's work. She said, I've been thinking, this is Kate McCaffrey. For those of you who attend regularly, you'll know her as well. I've been thinking a lot about Al. Oh, sorry, I'm on the wrong one. Working with Al was one of my first and earliest experiences working with an author. We're talking 22 years ago, back when I was 12 and working at Investment Executive. Yes, we all started when we were our work at life at 12. Negotiating his reprints, back when we did such things, was also my earliest experience in actually negotiating and doing business. Ever since then, time and again, he's been kind and generous and encouraging. He encouraged all of us to contribute and keep this group together. His generosity with his time made it happen. I think he even forgave some of my earliest editing attempts on his work when that happened too. Solidly a character. I hope someone writes him into a book one day. I would love to read that. Really going to miss Al. That was, I thought, a nice one, and it really ties into quite a few things that Rosemary said. So if I'm going to ask Peter to unmute himself and speak, but if you want more time, that's okay too.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I met Al 22 years ago. I was an ambassador for the Financial Planners Standards Council, and Al and I were introduced to each other, and we immediately hit it off. I've written 4 books since I met Al, and the reason I bring that up is Al was always encouraging. He would always encourage me. And one of the things that I thought was so beautiful about Al, because I'm writing something right now on Al, and I would say he gave whatever he had. And if he had someone that he thought could help you, he gave it to you. If he had a piece of advice that was worthwhile, he gave it to you. He never held back on that. And that was a beautiful thing. And then Al brought me into his podcasts, and he made me, he made me an expert in certain things. Like I spoke about demographics and emerging markets, and then him and Gavin relaunched it and rebranded it on investing. And, it was important for him that I participate. And, he was just a really gentle man. And one of the things I want to share with you is I moved to San Diego about 3 years ago. And just before the pandemic, Al and I sat down for coffee in the bottom of Manulife. And he was so grateful that I came. But the reason I bring that up, because I have 2 pictures of me and Al. One when he launched the book in 2013, and that one that I took with him. But one of my fondest memories of Al is I was stuck in Toronto for the first 5 months of COVID, and I would take my walks to to the Manulife Center, and Al and I would take a walk to UT and then back, and it was, it was really enjoyable. It made those months tolerable because he's one of the few people who I would see regularly. So he was a gentle soul, and again, when I think of Al, I say he gave whatever he had. And it didn't. He might have not had much, but whatever he gave, it was a lot.
See, that's another beautiful thing. And of course, that's when I get a chance to speak, I was going to say he was a gentle man, both and a gentleman. But yes, quite an unusual guy. So thank you very much, Peter, for speaking. I do have other things to read. So, but I'll read one from Tessa Wilmot, who also a number of you will know. Said, I've been thinking a lot about Al. He was such a part of my days at Investment Executive. I don't even remember when he started writing for us. He was a diligent and conscientious reporter, dedicated to getting the story right. Then there was all the work he did pulling the group together and keeping it going. This sounds familiar. I will miss Al and his occasional emails checking in on me once we went on the road. He was such a good person. My sincere sympathies to his family and to all his friends. I thought that was another nice one. Now, for the rest, again, some people may be needing to leave earlier than others. And so if somebody is amongst those, maybe either put up your hand or, okay, I can see that Darren is ready to go. And Darren, also thank you for putting the notes on LinkedIn that some of us have already seen.
Yeah, I was going to just actually read that and make it like, I know some of you have commented on it. Actually, I was looking at it just now and it's getting up close to 4,000 views and 14 people have commented and 4 shares and 42 people reacted to it. So, I'll read what I wrote because it's not that long, but one of the things that I've learned, I did attend Friday's session as well. I had to leave pretty much right after it was over, but what the broadness of his network and the significance and the broadness of this group, because there's a lot of people that I've seen comment that I know that Al knew, but we didn't know that each other knew. So there was like some of that I should, because in some way people are connected to financial services or journalism. So maybe I shouldn't be surprised, but it's always, you always see the fullness of someone's life sometimes afterwards when you see the connections that they had that they shared with you that you weren't perhaps aware of. Which anyway, I mean, so what I wrote on LinkedIn is simply, I said, I was saddened and sorry to hear about the passing of Al Emid, who succumbed to COVID pneumonia after a long battle with cancer on April 26th. Al and I had crossed paths numerous times over more than 2 decades. He was an accomplished financial journalist, freelance writer, and author, and was due to publish his latest book this summer. I hired him a few times over the years as a freelance contributor to various financial services, content hubs, and publications, but I'll remember him most fondly for the networking group he formed many years ago that I joined and presented at numerous times. During the financial crisis of 2008, many financial services writers, communications professionals, and content marketers found themselves out of full-time work and scrounging for freelance gigs. Al created a group that would meet once a month to trade tips, insights, and business strategies. He hosted the latest gathering just 3 weeks ago. Al was a real pro and such a kind gentleman. He'll be missed by many. My condolences to his sister Helen and the rest of the family, friends, and colleagues. The only thing I want to pick up from that is I was one of those people that was out of work in the financial services crisis for almost a year. And I can't remember who connected me to Al's group. It might have been Al, but I just remember that it was around 2008-9 that I first connected with it. And then over time, I brought in probably half a dozen other people myself. And For about the next 10 years, would usually present once a year on the content marketing thing that I kind of focused my career on in the latter years. But a lot of people have commented today in online before and at the service, and just people I've connected with, on Al's kindness. And it's a remarkably consistent thing you hear. And I remember how appreciative I was of his support at the time, because when was out of work, and it was a terrible time to be looking for full-time work back then during the crisis. But as it turned out, a lot of the topics that came up in that year, especially 2009 and 10, were the fact that a lot of these companies, while they weren't hiring full-time people, they had budgets and they still had work that had to be done. So there was opportunity there for freelancers. And it was Al who actually posted one of those meetings where we just kind of hung around a bit afterwards and chatted, encouraged me to sort of look at it that way, like, instead of just sort of saying, oh, there's no full-time jobs, like. And that's exactly how I ended up getting the next gig. I did a 3-month contract for Sun Life that turned into a 6-month contract. Then it turned into a 9-month, and then it turned into a full-time job that I was at for like 5.5 years. So I did always appreciate and recognize the gentle kindness of that man. And it's the thing I'll remember most about him, actually, even beyond the professional connection I had with him.
Thanks very much, Darren. Some of your words reminded me of the fact, actually, that I still can't find his formal obituary, and maybe those things are going the way of the, well, of full-time jobs and good news. And but I've for those of you who are thinking about it, I would like to do something for him, like I normally would give to the charity that's mentioned in the obituary. And there may be charities that you're aware of that Al was interested in, or, Ryerson School of Journalism or something like that. So if you do have ideas, feel free to mention them, and also, or put them in the chat if you'd like. So thanks again, Darren. Is there somebody else that would like to speak next? Okay, I'm going to take I'll speak next. Actually, this is more one part I think that we all have seen of Al too, and is best evoked by, on his own page, he says, I've attended the college of brutal experience that have survived. And I think many of us have that same feeling and experience. I also wanted to read, like, he had, I think he's had more individual recommendations on his LinkedIn than I've seen on anybody's. I'm not going to read them all, but there are a couple that just show his humor. One was from Susan Nyad, a publisher at Fact Magazine. Saying, I've already recommended Al, but I couldn't resist posting this. After I regained my composure, I recently bumped into a colleague who said that he had just been through what is known as an Emid interview for publication. The last thing he said was that he needed to take the rest of the day off to recover. So because he just keeps asking. Another one was, I believe that one quick anecdote completely describes Al to a T. I once jokingly asked him what he would like on his gravestone, and he simply responded, he always got his facts right. So again, somebody with very, very high standards for himself and others. Now, are there anybody else that wants to speak at this time?
I will.
Okay, Ruth and then Susan.
Okay. I was introduced to the group through a friend of Susan Frumstein's, and then so that I met Susan first, and I was introduced to the group just after I'd been laid off from my job copy editing at the Canadian Jewish News. And I have to say that this was around 2014, 2013. And I just have to say how inspiring it was to hear that different people were working in different areas and areas that I had never worked in. And also, I think it gave me the support and just helped me move on from after being laid off. So, and I do remember gentleness and kindness, Al's. I think that's the main thing. I mean, obviously he was a very, very good journalist, and he had his intellectual skills were very strong. But what I remember most is just what a kind and gentle person he was. And I think I would feel very privileged that I did go to those meetings, especially the in-person meetings, and that I saw him and met with him so many times.
Thank you very much. That was beautiful, and that's what was so unusual about that last meeting in April 3rd or something, 2nd, whatever, at the beginning of the month, which was, I believe that he was the one who raised, well, maybe we can start meeting together in person again in the fall. And so certainly a big shock to hear of his passing. And Susan Yellen, please go ahead.
Going to sound awfully familiar because I guess everybody was working at investment executive at the same time. I don't know, but I have to be honest, I couldn't remember when the first time was that I met Al, because most of the time I was talking on the phone with him when I was an editor at IE and he was a freelance writer. What I always kind of admired about him was that he put down everything he knew about a subject, and usually that was insurance. And that was important. He taught me how to be a proper freelance writer, because you get paid by the word, so you should put down everything you know about the subject. I did finally meet Al when IE had its 10th anniversary party, as Rosemary said, and from then on we had an ongoing friendship, and sometimes he'd give me tips on potential freelance jobs that were out there, and sometimes I would even try them out. I give Al all the kudos I can, like everybody else has been today, for putting together the CPS group and keeping it together for these many years through the pandemic and whatever. Nothing seemed to bother him. I know that he was not well at one point, although he did keep his personal life very, well, personal. But I was very sorry to hear that he had passed on, and I give my condolences to his sister and to the rest of his family, and I know that he will long be remembered for the person that he really was.
And that's beautiful. Is there somebody else that would like to speak at the moment? Oh, I see Jocelyn raising her hand. How about you? So please go. Sorry, after you unmute. After you unmute. Sorry, can you unmute?
There you go. All right, I'm back. Like Norma, I met Al through Katita Stark. And I was reticent about joining the group. It was at a time when I had just left a business I'd had with several other people, and I felt very much at sea. And she said, you should come because it's good and Al's welcoming, and she couldn't have been more right. He was absolutely welcoming, and I met some great people. And even though it really isn't what I did, I learned a lot from the people around there. And I was always impressed that Al would organize talks and bring in speakers. And I thought, this man is incredible. These people are just coming because they like what you're doing and we all like to meet each other. But that's a lot of work for someone who's also working for themselves. And I agree, he was such a kind man, such a gentle man. And he always made you feel like you were the most important person in the world when he was talking to you. And when you're feeling kind of low, it was great. So I'm very sorry that he's gone. I actually have a hard time believing that he's gone. So I will remember him, and I'm glad we're doing this, and that his sister will hear how much people appreciated him. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Jocelyn. Is there somebody else that would like to speak next? Okay, I think I see Keith Damsel. Just a second.
I think I'm off mute now. Yeah. Yeah, no, first of all, thanks very much for organizing this. I think, like everyone on this call, very surprised to hear this news last week. And it's funny, I've been thinking, like all of you, thinking a lot about Al. And it's funny for me because he's been very foundational for me in my career in a way, because I first got to know Al when I was working at the Globe and Mail, covering the investment fund business. And I would steal all his great ideas, and then I would run into him and he'd say, I saw you did that story on the ETFs. And anyway, we'd laugh about that. So he was a great source of inspiration in that respect. Then when I shifted and joined Franklin Templeton, and working for the business here in Canada and then shifting into a global role, what I found really interesting was that as I lost colleagues and friends along the way through my career changes, Al was a constant person in my life. And I think he always saw, for me personally, he always saw the value in what I could bring to a conversation despite my changing roles and what I was doing. And this was said earlier, he made you feel like you were the only person in the room when you were speaking with him, and had such a generous spirit, and very cared deeply about the craft of journalism, which is such a fleeting thing these days. And it's tough. I think it's a great loss for financial journalism, and a great loss for so many of his colleagues that he helped through so many difficult times. So yeah, I'm gonna very much miss him.
Thank you very much, Keith. That it's very heartfelt, as I think we're all kind of, our emotions are going one way and the other way and so on. Is there anybody else that wanted to talk at the moment? Okay, hi, Don.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to, I was when I acquired Al and Graham's book for Wiley, and you go through the process of attending a publishing meeting and presenting it here in Canada. And I was so appreciative of the acknowledgement that my colleagues in the United States made to Al's expertise and Graham's expertise, because the book, Investing in Frontier Markets, the quality of the content, they decided that they were going to publish it in Wiley's finance series and not as a general trade publication. And I thought that's the only book I ever, of the many, I don't know, books I brought to Wiley's list, this is the only one that was recognized in that way. What's kind of funny and ironic is that about a year and a half later, I got an email, and Wiley had closed Canadian division by this time, but they got in touch with me and said, we're going to do a dummies edition of a Wiley finance book. And this may be the only time in Wiley's history that a book has gone from a Canadian retail of $125 to about $24.99. But Al and Gavin took it in stride. They had to rewrite Frontier Markets according to the dummies template. But I always felt Al was a little mystified at being a dummies branded author. Loved him dearly. We were working on his book for Dundurn, and I had to break sad news to the folks at Dundurn and submit what Al had finished at this point. We had another month to work on the book and complete it, but anyway, and got a nice message back from the managing editor at Dundurn, and condolences from all. So but he was unique. He was very funny, generous, kind, warm, and always very curious. And I think that's a sign of an intellect that was large, but there was never an ego attached to it.
Thanks very much, Don. That again tied into one of the other quotes from his recommendations, which was, Al is one of the most determined people I've ever met. Most writers, before they achieve publication, have notions of how to do it, or chips on their shoulder, or they stop short. Al kept going. He found people to advise him. He was courteous and analytical in a very impressive way, and he succeeded. Now he's the author of multiple published books, which is something that many others of us aspire to. So I'm also interested in knowing, he had spoken to me late last year and early into January, because there was the possibility that he was going to be going to the Middle East again and I believe it was for a book. So if anybody knows what that was, I'm curious, and I do hope, Dawn, I think we were talking before you started, that we do hope that the book will be able to be completed, kind of as a final thanks to Al and his sister and all the work you've already put into it.
Well, yes, I'm just waiting for some feedback from the group. I mean, there's quite a bit of work left to be done, and I'm certainly not qualified to do it. We know what the nature of the work is, but I think I just don't know at this point what Dundurn will come back with.
Sorry, thanks, Dawn. And is somebody else would like to speak that hasn't yet spoken? Oh, did I see Sarah? Yeah, hi, Sarah.
Yes. Hi. So it was very sad to hear about the news about Al. I've worked with him on the corporate communications side. We did probably our first interview 18 years ago with one of my spokespeople at Franklin Templeton. And it's been, great working with him. He's always very supportive of events that you host and showing up for things, even if it doesn't, suit what his work is exactly. He's always very supportive and generous of his time, and definitely will miss him. He's what we call gold in the reporting industry. He really was reliable in that way, and such a special relationship. So I wanted to send my condolences and sympathies to Helen and his family and all his friends here on the call. It's great to see everyone and hear your memories about Al. So I'm very sorry for all of your loss. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. That was beautiful. I like that word gold, for sure. Is there somebody else that would like to speak? Some people may not want to speak or may not feel that they can speak at this time, so don't worry about that. I'll interject one last thing. Al also drove me crazy because it was like, why do you talk about this? And why do you talk about that? And so I always felt guilty and not able to do it. But he was so kind about it, right? He never, it was just always fun. And then he would have this, laugh that would go crazy. So one thing that I did help him with, instead of the usual thing where he was helping us, was I guess he was working on doing editing for his podcasts. And so somebody had come in to talk about it and then showed afterwards, Al and me, how to use Audacity, which is, I guess, a very, it's a recording editing software. So we continue to kind of help each other out on how to do that, how to import, and he continued to be passionate about learning any new thing that he could, right through to the end. So hopefully I will be continuing to learn more with him as well. Now, so so I think I've got about 5 people maybe that haven't spoken yet, but I see somebody unmuting, so I will mute myself.
Frances has her hand up.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Frances has her hand up.
Frances?
Hi. A lot of what other people said were things I was thinking too, how sad I was to hear the news that I'll miss Al, although I haven't been writing really the last year, so I haven't been at the group in a while. But I joined, Ruth brought me into the group. We worked together at the Canadian Jewish News. And when I came into the group, I hadn't started freelancing yet. So the group, and I would say Al specifically, played an important role for me, like implicitly reminding me that I was still a writer and that I still had something to contribute. And I would say I was struck by how he sought input from everyone and helped everyone really contribute to the best of their ability. And I remember one conversation I had with him when he wanted me to present, and I really thought I had nothing nothing to share. And after we talked, something came to me, and it was kind of a lesson for me. And I think he had a way of asking questions that would draw out ideas from people, and always in a very kind, gentle way. But at the same time, whenever there was a presentation, he would always ask really pertinent questions afterwards. So he always enhanced the presentations. And I think that was really important. He organized relevant programs, diverse programs. And one thing he did for quite a few years was to ask me if there were any conflicts with Jewish holidays. So I think that speaks to his kindness, thoughtfulness, and how detail-oriented he was. And I'll miss him too, and I send my condolences to the family. And thanks for organizing this, Barb. I think it's really good that we have an opportunity to do this.
Yeah, I found this actually more positive than, you know, some other ways of recognizing people. So, but it's only that way because everybody is participating. And the one other thing I'll mention before going back and asking if any other people want to speak was from at the funeral on Friday. It was also so beautiful the way obviously the love between him and his sister, but also he doesn't just have nieces, he has awesome nieces. I believe it was that, awesome nieces. And I thought, again, that he builds up everybody that he's with. So, and I never saw him lose his temper, which every now and then I do. Is there anybody else that would like to speak? Okay, Deborah.
Hi, Francis has given me a little courage because my reminiscence of Al is very recent. And so I guess I represent the most recent part of his world. I became involved with CPES, I guess in late November. Vince and I collaborated on a presentation because immediately, of course, he asked us to present. And then I did a second one. And they were, as everybody has said, that he was very supportive and very encouraging. I was struck by his intelligence, his deep kindness, his passion for life, a gentleman, and very unique. It's not my nature to share personal details about my life, and I know that Al was very private, but I became attracted to him. And then he asked me out on a date, and that date never happened. We tried several times to get together, and then he died. And so the news hit me really hard because it was not just the loss of a growing friendship, but also the loss of a potential. And he's a man, frankly, I'll never know. And I think that's really, it was so bittersweet. He encouraged me in getting, revving up my journalism career because I hadn't been doing an awful lot of it recently. And, but he also encouraged me personally, and he was such a gentleman, very careful about the way he interacted with women. And I think that's being reflected here in what's being said. When I got the news, I took off to north of Pickering, where I live, into nature, because I always find that soothing. And see, I'm emotional, but that's okay. I wrote him a poem about a tribute to him. And I don't know if it's appropriate to say this here, to read it here, but if it is, I would share this poem with you.
I think it would be very nice, yes.
It's not just the romance, it's called I'll Never Know. He understood a writer's life could drain our souls and ask too much. This lonely craft, it needed cheer, he said, and helped us find it. Al forged his path on distant shores, his love, the world of finance, with writer's charm, reporter's wit, and laser focus on our craft. As friendship bloomed, he asked me out. My fall of life became like spring. And as Forsythia peeked out, my hope, my heart both opened. But there were deadlines, editors, a source to chase at 3 a.m. He did a lot of that. I understood and so held still, waiting for our moment. Now here I stand in sunset's glow, with news I fight, mocked by time, despair for what will never be, a good man I can never know. He was a truly good man. And my way of expressing the deepest part of my soul is in poetry, which is kind of weird for a journalist, but that was the poem I wrote for him. Thank you for letting me share it.
That was actually beautiful, and it captures many things about writing and so on. And it is, I loved the mention of the fall going to spring, and mention of Forsythia, which is always one of the bright things, yes. So thank you also for wearing beautiful yellow today, and happy birthday. For those of you who don't realize, we had a little bit at the beginning, so. Now, is there a couple of others? I think we're down to maybe only 3 people that haven't had a chance to speak, and just wondered if, and some people may want to speak a second time. Okay, I see Vince, just a second. Vince.
Hi there, thank you. I met Al in February 2020. Well, actually, we met by correspondence. Norma introduced us because I was trying to find my way in communications in this digital world. So Norma had recommended my being part of the group, so I reached out to Al through email, and then we chatted through LinkedIn, and I was at my first meeting in February of 2020 before we locked down and went virtual after that. And he encouraged me at the end of that year to do a wrap-up of PR and leading into, I was a little terrified and intimidated speaking to all you experts about communications. But he was wonderful. He held my hand through the first one, and said, send him a draft and we'll talk about it. So he encouraged me there. And then from there, he became a mentor and a friend, because he encouraged me to pursue presentations on social media. And again, I was a little intimidated because I, like most of you, just post like everyone else. But to have to research and dig and find lessons learned and put a toolkit together for you folks was really was a lot of work. But again, he was very encouraging in that sense and kept asking me to continue that topic. So he really kind of got me out of my comfort zone, because again, I only knew as much as I did, but he encouraged me to continue learning. So and I've been seeking out a good mentor for quite a while now. So I had one for a short time, and I'll treasure that.
That's very, very nice as well. Yeah, I joined in around, I think, 2015, 2016 through Susan Fromstein. And so I thought all of you guys always knew all of you. And I hadn't realized that some of you were kind of newbies and some of you were old bees and so on. So now, does anybody else would like to speak? I think it's either Judy and or Barbara.
I can speak if that's, can you hear me?
Yes, that'd be great.
I don't remember how I came to the group. I was recommended by somebody. At that time, I was considered an expert on LinkedIn. So you can imagine how many years ago that was. He was very thorough in vetting me to make sure that I was the right person to be addressing this important topic. And I remember the kind of newbie resentment of like, why is that important? Why should we be on LinkedIn? Whatever. I mean, I've lost track of all the intricacies of LinkedIn myself. But anyways, after that, I was welcomed into the group, and I was a very good attendee for many years. And I don't even know when this began, maybe 2011. I'm not sure. I've been racked with guilt because I've had some deaths in my family. And for the last 2 years, I've not attended. And I only spoke to him briefly in all that time. And he loyally kept sending me invitations, and you did, Barb. And, you know, the fleetingness of life, that's what was so horrible. That I kept thinking, I don't want to get involved. He's going to ask me to do a presentation. Oh, God. And then next thing you know, this horrible news comes. So it's sad that I'm here now and I never once participated in any of his Zoom presentations. And whatever, I just wanted to share my guilt. I don't know, relieve me of it. I don't know what to say. But I mean, that was a constant in my life. Every Monday I would go to one of his meetings, and I got a lot out of it, and I made some good friends out of it too. So that's my bit. Thank you for hearing me out.
That was actually beautiful in so many ways, and Al would absolutely not have held this against you. He would have encouraged you to come back, and it is just so unfortunate with COVID getting in the way. Although I have to say, it's been a great way to meet and keep in touch with people as well. So thank you for sharing with us. That was, I know it was hard, but we're so glad you're here, and I'm sure, absolutely sure, that his sister Helen would be too. And so I didn't know with Barbara Silverstein whether you'd like to talk or not, because it's, as you said, it's not required, because I think that Helen and nieces will know just from watching this that here's somebody that cared deeply, and to spend the time with us here.
Can you hear me? Am I on mute?
No, you're good.
Okay. You know, I didn't attend a lot of groups. I kept forgetting. And I was connected through Ruth and Francis, because I also wrote for the Canadian Jewish News. And Al was always very nice. He invited me to a meeting, I guess it must have been a couple of weeks ago. And he said, I heard such good things about you. And I thought, how sweet. He didn't really know me, but it was just through this communication. And I regret, missing that last one and not attending more meetings. And so I don't know if the group will continue, but I hope to attend again. But he just struck me as such a wonderful, sweet man.
Thank you very much. That's something I think we'll have to talk about and maybe do through emails, because it is a relationship. I must admit, it has been a pleasure meeting all of you through him. So I think I hadn't realized I should thank him and then multiply it by several times. And for Judy, because I know that the arm twisting saying you must talk about something, it just drove me crazy until I took a page out of the book that I thought was Vince and Devorah, where they were presenting kind of together and really getting somebody else to help you with it. Misery shared was the way that I could have put together the last presentation that I did with another person who is not able to be here, Carrie Cathers. I've just seen that Steve has joined us, and Steve, we've just been going around and sharing some stories, reading some notes that people have sent. I hate to put you on the spot, but you're so good at doing that to other people that I feel completely okay.
Thank you, and welcome everyone to Paris, where we are right now, getting ready for dinner. Al was unique, and I've known Al, I have to say 30, 35 years, going back to when I was with the stock exchange. And he was always really fair, but he was driven, he was smart, he was focused, he got the story right away. That was tremendous. And then Al and I would have this running joke going, because no matter when he emailed me, I always returned an email within like 10 minutes. And he said, do you ever take time off? You send me an email at 5 a.m, you send me an email on the weekend, you send me an email at night. And I said, if you're working, I'm working. And I think we had that mutual respect that went on for all those years. And And you know, Al, the other thing Al used to do, like he did with many of you, he used to constantly get me do these presentations for the group, even when I didn't have as much to say as I thought I would. But Al kept pushing and kept pushing and kept pushing, and I'll miss my frequent conversations with him. And he was a good man, and you know, I hope that whoever is able to listen to this realizes that we all cared about him, and he is definitely going to be missed.
Thanks very much, Steve. So I will hopefully have managed to record this properly, and we'll let you know after we do send this to Helen, and with the with some of the other written things that I've received. We'll follow up with you afterwards, kind of by email. I don't know whether Steve was nice glasses.
No, it's just that we're in a park, and they have a sign out about rats, and one just ran by my wife, and so we're leaving this park now.
Okay, that is something that I think Al would have found very
He would have
amusing also. The consummate professional who kind of just lets things go as he continues on.
Over the last hour, we've heard testimonials to how generous and how kind and how competent Al Emid was. Al, I miss you. I miss our calls. I mentioned earlier on in the video, in my testimonial, to how Al impacted me, that one of the greatest moments in my life was taking walks with Al when I was stuck in Toronto during COVID while my family was in San Diego. And I look forward to taking walks with Al. And he had such a curious mind, and he always looked for opportunities to include me. One of the things that I take from Al is, again, as I said before, whatever he had, he gave. He introduced me to someone who's become very close to me, Jolie, of Jolie magazine, a magazine that over 50 million people read every issue around the world. He met Jolie, and the first thing he did is he introduced me. He always found a place to find opportunity for other people, maybe to a fault. He would give you his jacket if you were cold, and it didn't matter if he was cold. Al was a special person, and the lesson that we all take is that we can always make someone's life better by giving encouragement, and we can always be better. And Al, he was always curious. He would always ask a question, and then he would go and he would try to understand it, and he would come back and he would ask more qualifying questions, and he always asked you to be better, to present. And there's nothing like giving encouragements. There's two types of people in this world: those that knock you down and those who build you up. And the life of Al Emid is testimonial to a man who built people up. We lost a great writer, one of the great financial writers in Canadian history, someone who loved getting it right to the best of his ability. And I lost a great mentor, a friend, and an older brother, someone I know that when I called, he was always excited to hear my voice, and I was excited to hear Al's as well. And one of the most incredible things about this man is you'd meet him and you wouldn't think much of him because he didn't take a lot of space. But he was a treasure and a jewel, and I'm honored that Al's story is a part of my story, and I hope that through my life, his story continues. And I want to thank everyone who's joined us on this call to say such meaningful and kind things about a man who is more deserving of kinder words. More appreciation should have come this man's way. but anybody knew that Al Emid was a jewel. Al, rest in peace. I look forward to us joining each other again and you making me laugh.